today. Welcome, friends. We are, if you can believe it, we are finishing up week 11 when we're talking about our our one-to-many relationship. You do have one core assignment just to start. You've got a dojos and ninjas. We were just talking about that just briefly in our office hours. That's the core assignment. You will, after today, basically have all the information to be able to complete that. And then you also have a discussion question due. So please make sure that you guys are keeping up with those. Do not let that be the thing that prevents you from being able to pass the class and continue forward that way. Okay, give me a second. I'm gonna stand up. I just, I used to teach sitting down, and so I don't know what, I can't do it. Okay, so great. Let's go ahead and get started. What we're doing, if you remember, is we sort of started our one-to-many relationship portion last Tuesday. We went into our database. We established this one-to-many relationship within our database. We established our foreign key within our video game. And then what we did is now we're going to be able to kind of grab some information and be able to create. Basically, we're able to create a user. We're going to be able to get a user, update a user, delete a user, kind of do all that crud stuff. What we're also going to do is be able to view a user and all of the games that they've created. And so that's really going to emulate this dojos and ninjas in the same way as like many ninjas are associated to one dojo. We're going to have, many games can be associated to one user sort of thing. So that's what we're going to be building out today. Again, this is kind of what you have to look forward to next week. We're going to be doing validations. And so we've already built out our create user. We called it registration. We've already built that out. But we are also next going to be building out validations just to make sure our data is good. Then we go into login and registration, and then we have our belt prep. So we're really two more weeks of learning things. And then 1 week of sort of review, and then the belt exam opens up. So it's pretty fun. We are doing it, friends. We are doing it. Okay. This is where we left off, where
We're excited. Sorry.
yeah, no, you're fine. No, yeah, I'm excited too. But this is where we left off. We're able to create a user. Let me get this open and let's just get it running. So I'm activating my environment, and then I'm gonna say Python server.py. Great, we're on 5,000. Let's do localhost 5,000. Awesome. So we're still just kind of in this place. We've got a dashboard. This is our video game. We're kind of abstract this and change this. But if we go to user, we have this create user. And then once it's created, we just go straight to a dashboard. We have checked and made sure that in our workbench, we are able to see the value. So we are able to create a user. We just haven't done anything with that. So let's go ahead and build on it. And I'm going to open this up real fast, just so that way we can continue to test, continue to see stuff. If we go to, I think we called it GameDB. Yeah, we did. So if we go to users and I grab this, I just have Charlie Calhoun, my faithful dog. Okay. So there's one thing I want to do just kind of from the get-go. Usually I don't do this for another like 2 weeks, but I just think it's a lot easier and it's going to make it much more efficient for us. Let me make this a little bit bigger for it. Oops. So that's exactly what I was trying to avoid. Cool. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
Cool. When we are creating a user, we have this value here. We have this method, this class method, create user. And if you guys can recall from our MySQL connection, in our query, we have this word insert, right? Insert for us means that we're going to create something new. And so if you refer back to this, I'm going to kind of cancel some of this stuff out. If you refer back to this, it says, hey, any query, or it's going to check the query after it's run. So running query. And it's going to say if it contains insert, what it does is it first lowers everything. So because obviously this is sometimes in all caps and that, it just lowers everything. That's what this query lower does. And then it finds and it's looking for the word insert. Again, insert is a keyword for us to know that we're creating. And so it's saying, if that's the case, I want to return the last ID, right? I want to turn the last ID of whatever was just created. So what's kind of cool, if we're thinking about a registration, or if we think about like Facebook, right? When you register, you log in. When you do that and you click that, it automatically takes you to your dashboard, right? Because it knows that you are the person that's logged in. And so what is a way, knowing that piece of information, if I wanted to keep that information, this user ID, I wanted to keep that specific ID, unique identifier, persistent throughout each of my pages or my different redirects. What's a tool within Python that I could use that would do that? Hint, it's on this page somewhere. When we want to keep track of something or want it to remember a piece of information, remember each request, data only lives for that request, but we've introduced something, especially in Ninja Gold, where we introduced a tool within Flask that we are able to use, and then we can keep track of information. You guys remember what that is?
I know you had mentioned it before. I'm just trying to think right now.
Yeah, it's session.
Oh,
Right, remember session is something that we can just temporarily, or it's kind of like a cookie, right? Where we can store some information and we have access to that. So if we know that when we create a user, upon creation, or in this case, we called it registration, right? When they register, and we know that we're getting back the ID of that, what we could do is we could actually throw that ID in session, and we will know who is currently navigating our platform, right? So what I could say is session of user ID equals user ID. Right? And so now what I have is the ID, or the unique identifier, of whoever's logged in. And I don't have to, I can use that however I will. So it's going to be a big key whenever we are creating video games. Does that make sense? Just kind of reiterate, this create user method runs a query that has the word insert. In our MySQL connection, we've established that anytime we run a query with the word insert, which is all of our creations, it always gives us back the ID of whatever was just inserted, or whatever was created. It gives us back that ID. So we're saying, okay, I know who was just created. I'm going to store that information. So as they're navigating, or as they're doing stuff, I know who's doing what. Does that make sense? Just put a 1 in the chat if that makes sense. Put a 0 if it does not. Any questions on that? You guys are really quiet today. You were talkative earlier. Did I lose you? Bueller?
Sorry. What did you ask? I had to use the restroom.
No, you're fine. I'm just making sure that you guys understand when I create a user, we've established that in my MySQL connection, if we use the insert queries, it returns to us the ID number of the row that was just created. So whatever the user we just created, it gives us their ID. Well, if I know that, then I can throw that ID into session. And so now I can keep track of whoever is logged in. That way I know if they're creating a game or whatever sort of actions they do on my website, I know who's doing those actions. They like a post. Think about Facebook, right? They like a post. If they leave a comment, I know who that is.
Got it. Okay.
So there's another way that we can. I think about Facebook when somebody logs in or they register, it goes straight to their profile, right? So what we can do is we can actually take that information. And so when it goes to dashboard, and we know that they were just created, so that's good. we can go and say, okay, when they go to dashboard, I actually want to retrieve that user's information. And I want to say, hey, user first name. So in this route, what we can do is we have this render template. What I can also do is I can say user equals user dot get one let's say get one user. And I'm going to pass in the session ID. Now we don't have a get one user yet, so we need to go ahead and create that, right? So let's go. Where do I go? If I'm going to create this user, get one user, where would I go? Where does that exist?
Your controller.
I'm in my controller right now.
Oh, sorry.
Very good.
Um,
In the same way that it's user.create
oh,
user,
model.
user. Yeah, my model, right? So let's go ahead and create that. I'm going to create a class method and it's going to be def get one user. It's going to be a class method, right? Because it's always because this is a class method, it always takes in CLS. And secondly, we're passing in an ID, right? It needs to know what ID I have. Now, we'll test this, and I'm not quite sure that this will work because what will happen, and I want to see if it works, and if not, I think it'll break, and that's okay. I want to see it broken, but I have a theory that it's actually not going to work. That's incorrect. Oh, I see. Well, that it would work. I don't want to make it so confusing. So here's what I can do. The reason I was saying it wasn't going to work is when we are passing in data, it's looking for a key value pair, right? And it's specifically looking for, hey, I've got this query and I'm trying to insert some information. And so this value must match whatever key that's in my, I must have a key within my dictionary that I'm passing in or whatever data is that must match this name. And the reason I didn't think it would work is because here we're just passing in session ID, session user ID. And remember that is a key value pair of user underscore ID and then some, one, right? And so this key would not match this ID, this value right here. Now what ChatGPT did is it created a new dictionary. And this is fine to do, that's okay. That just made sure that these matched. So the other thing I could do is I could say user underscore ID. And then pass in user underscore ID.
That's definitely better, Will.
This way?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I do too.
It's not as confusing.
I think this will work. And if not, we can figure it out. Okay. Now, what this is also doing is this is grabbing. This is saying, okay, I created this query. We're saying, hey, my user is, and now when we run this query, right? Of select all from user where ID equals user underscore ID. I have a feeling that this is actually not going to work. That's okay. We'll test it and make the error. If we go to MySQL connection, anytime we do a select, it will return from the database a list of dictionaries. It is always a list of dictionaries, even if in this case, we're just looking up by the ID number right? So in theory, we should only have one that matches that ID. It's always going to be a list of dictionaries. And so because that's the case, because we know we're always going to receive when we're just querying a get, when we are selecting all or we're selecting one, it's always a list of dictionaries. We want to be able to have the power of object-oriented programming. We want to be able to, let's say if I had all these methods or I had all this stuff, I want to be able to have access to that. And so what we do is we have this user. User is just a list of dictionaries. And I'm returning the class instance, meaning it's running whatever I get back through this init, right? And it's actually creating a class instance of that value. Now there should only be one value in there because I'm saying there should only be one thing with a user ID that matches the user ID, right? But I still have to identify this is the dictionary or this is the object that I want to associate. And so I return the actual class instance of the first value in my, and it should be my only, but the first and only value in my dictionary. Does that make sense?
Not exactly. Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, of course. So when I'm running any sort of like, any sort of query that has select, and those are usually select all from users or select all from users where, and they have some sort of condition. Anytime it's got the select and I run this, this is going to return to me. This is going to return to me a list. So user, because remember, user becomes whatever the value of this is, whatever this equates to, is always, 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 when we're running a select, it's always going to be a list of dictionaries. In this case, because we're saying where ID equals user ID, only one value should have that same ID, right? But let's say hypothetically, we're just doing the select all from users, and I'm getting all my users. It's going to return a list of dictionaries of however many users are in my database. Right?
Yeah.
Again, because we're identifying that this should be just this ID, only one, right? An ID is sort of like a social security number. Only one should have that. So it should only give us just one value. But so in this case, we should get user of this, right? This is what we would get back. Now, I could just return user of 0, right? And that's just returning the dictionary or whatever the object at user of position 0 is. If I just do this, then all it is a read-only dictionary. Sure, I could throw, I could read it, but I don't have any power of object-oriented programming. Let's say, for example, I had a at static method. It's called, we're going to say def full name, that does this. And it takes the full name of whatever, whatever we're dealing with, right? Now, if I had that and I had some sort of static method, I can't use that if I just leave it as a dictionary, right? I lose out on all the power on anything that my actual object can do. So to prevent that, so that way we can make sure that we are always keeping up with our objects, we create it, or we create it as an object here, where I run CLS that makes sure that what I'm giving back is an actual instance of user in this case. So that way, if on my HTML or something, I want to run the, user dot full name and get the full name here, I can do that.
Will, I have a question. Since you did the static method, would it
Uh-huh.
have worked if you would have put self here and self dot first name underscore first name? Would it have worked the same
That would
or
have been
no?
an instance method. But
Okay.
yeah, I think that could have worked.
Okay.
Yeah. But really the thing to take is we are always making a class instance. We don't want to read just a dictionary. Because you kind of lose out on the power of object-oriented programming.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to test this. I think it's going to break. I don't think it's going to work because I think this is going to break. But we're going to try it. Cool. Actually, instead of that, I'm going to tell you, we're just going to go ahead and fix it because it's not going to work. What I know is I need to pass in and get my ID, right? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say data equals. And I'm going to say user ID is session. Actually, I'm just going to say ID. What did I call it here? I'm just going to say ID because it makes more sense and it's more succinct. And that's what we have across all of them. I'm going to say ID is equal to session user ID. Right? Again, it has to have a key value pair. The reason that it wasn't going to work is because I was passing in session user ID. What that's going to equate to is just the numerical value or whatever that ID is. And so if I was trying to call that here and I just said user underscore ID, it's gonna say, I don't know, I don't see a key of that. I just see the number 1, right? I don't see an object or a key value pair. That's why it was trying to kind of do that down there. So I take this in. This actually should be called data. Because that makes more sense, right? I passed in data, I'll call it data. So now it should work just fine. And then what's nice about that is because I gave my HTML of user dashboard, this user that I can refer to, right? And I'm getting the user that I just created. I can go into there, user dashboard. And instead, I could say, hello. User dot first name. And so if we come back, everything's saved. This is still running and we refresh. I say Marley, Calhoun. I create user. It says hello, Marley. And if we look under the hood at what happened, is we can see, let me kind of bring this up a little bit, is when I pressed create user, it ran this insert into users, right? And it created my user. Then what it did is it put my user ID into session and it redirected me to user dashboard. So it comes right here. What user dashboard does is creates this new dictionary called data. It's got a key of ID and a value of whatever that new ID is. Then it redirects us to this. And before it can fully redirect us, it says, oh, I need to go grab this piece of information. It runs get one user with the new session ID, whatever that value is, which is Marley. And so we can see that when it says get one where ID equals ID, it's saying select all from users where ID equals 2 because Marley's my second value. We are returning the class instance and then we are good to go. And we can now show Marley or my user page, whatever that is. Now this is where it's going to get a little frosty, so stay with me. we've talked about how we can, we have this index.html that's got create a game. This game's got a bunch of information, or it's got a form really, right? That's got title. I'm actually going to change that. I'm going to create a new HTML. And that's going to be called game form.html. Perfect. Exclamation point. I'm going to grab this. And then I'm actually just going to take this whole thing. Let's go to my index. Create. So I need a container. And I take this. And then we're good. And if I could spell container right. Okay. So we're fine, right? Now, same thing. And then now, maybe I've got another one that says to, let me say controller to user page. So I'm going to say /user. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say /user. Let me say create user. Then I'm going to do another one to game. I need to go into my controller. I don't have anything that's going to point to this new game form. So maybe I'll just say app route. I'm not going to say game new. I'm just going to say game just because that's what we have for user. Cool. We'll do that. So all I am doing is just making a new route that really just now can show my form so they can be separate. And the last thing is I'll just say game here. And I'll say create game. Okay. So if we go back to my document and I go just to localhost 5000, we get this. I've got dashboard where I can go to a dashboard. It's my game dashboard. I can go to create user and I can go to create game. Maybe what I'll do. Yeah, that's fine. Cool. So what we have to think about is when we are thinking about our games, we don't have any games anymore, right? But if we look at our games, we have a couple different columns. We have our ID, which we know, title, rating, platform, development studio, all that. But now we have this user ID. And this is a way that I can associate the user who created the game or with the game, with the user who created the game, right? I want to know which user created what game. And so what I can do is get a little bit clever with this. I know, and we're eventually going to build out the functionality that you can't create a game unless you're registered or logged in, right? So I can assume that the functionality is, or at least the flow is, that unless somebody is logged in or registered, we can't create a game. So anytime a game is being created, the user has to be logged in, right? They either create their own account and then they can create a game, or they log into their account and they can create a game. So based off of that knowledge, knowing that users are going to have to be logged in some regards, whether again, they just created something or they're logged in, I can associate what user is creating what game because I'll be able to know which user is logged in. What do I have access to that tells me what user is currently logged in or created in this sense? We just did it.
The session with the user
The
ID.
session. Exactly. So what I can do is I can go into my form and I can create an input that is of type hidden. I'm going to say user ID, And its value is going to be equal to session of user underscore ID. And so what this does is it allows me to say, hey, I want to pass in what user's currently logged in via session. I'm calling it user underscore ID here. And its value is whatever value I currently have in session, i.e. whoever's logged in or who just created their profile, right? And so this is a powerful tool to kind of pass some hidden information. Our users never see this input. So in all theory, we come here and I refresh and I look at my create game. You don't see that, but if I inspect, you could actually see that I've got this, my form, and you can see that I have this input. Again, you don't see it, but it's got a value of 2, which we know that Marley, who was just created, is 2. So we know that it's working. So the only thing I have to change from what we've already created is I now just have to pass in user ID equals, and I don't even have to say that. I could say request.form user ID. Cool. I'm going to pause there. How are we feeling about this?
So far, so good.
Okay, great.
At least for me.
Anything else? Anybody?
I would say it's coming along. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So let's create our first one. I'm going to create a Halo rating E platform. I'm going to say cross platform.
I think Halo is only for Xbox, though, I think.
You can play it on PC as well.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then we'll say it's the original one. So we'll say it's Bungie. Okay, so when I create this game, cool. Takes me to my dashboard. Now we've got a little bit of an issue. That's okay. And we'll see what our issue is here in just a second. Ah. So remember, I added this user ID because we need this, right? But I forgot to, in my actual query itself, if I go to my video game, I forgot to pass in that platform or pass in that value. So I needed to say user underscore ID. And I needed to say, I called it user underscore ID here. They're saying, hey, something went wrong. I don't have a default value and you didn't give me one, right? You did not give me this required field. Can't do it. Didn't work. So I had to go in and I had to say, oh yeah, I need to identify. This is a field I want to add into, and this is the value I want to add it. So now if we go back and we run it, refresh again, we'll say Halo E Bungie, and I say create game. Cool. Now we get it here. We see Halo E cross-platform Bungie. That's great. But if we come here and I say select all from games, I refresh, I also get this ID 2. ID of 2. Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, so now we can start associating the two. Now let's hypothetically say the way we wanted this to work is we wanted this to be able to, when I go to, let me create a button that says maybe all users. Or sorry, let's think about this. The way I think it should work, at least for now, and then we can kind of keep building this on, is when you log in and I go to my user profile, which is really just this user dashboard, right? When I go to this user dashboard, I want to be able to also see all my information. So I want to see my first name, last name, whatever. But I also want to see all the games that I've created. And this is where we need to now join two tables together. And so in this, let's go ahead and let's just say class method at class method. I'm going to say def get user with games. Okay. So stay with me here for just a second. What I want to do is I need to import game. So from import game. Cool. So this is saying from my game app dot models dot video game. I want to import the class of game. So I'm saying I want to be able to import this, and it's not game, it's video game. Cool. Now, this looks very scary, and we're going to walk through it. A-okay. We are wanting to get my user, where the ID of user ID matches whatever we have, which is what's coming in from data, which is going to be whatever's in session, right? So we're saying, hey, I want to get my user and I want to get the games that is associated to my user. Now, if you remember all the way back, we talked about left joins and joins. Let's pretend that this is my user table. Okay. And I've got a game table. Now, what this join is going to do is I want to be able to have access to all of my information, right? I want to be able to have access to the user and the games associated to that user. And so what my join does is it takes this and it says, okay, let's pretend that this kind of box, or what it does is it takes my two tables and it joins them on a like value. What my like value is it's saying, hey, connect these two tables. So select all from users because I'm coming from my user side. Join games. So join my game table on user ID equals games underscore user ID. Or users.id equals games underscore ID. So what it's saying is, hey, wherever in your game table, whatever values where the attribute of user ID equals the attribute of my current ID or whatever user I'm dealing with, I want you to join those two together. So if this user has the ID of 2, I want you to get me all of the games where the user ID value is also 2. And so that's what a join is doing, is it's just joining those two together, and then it makes one instance or one row with all that information. Now I could have multiple of these, right? Let's say Marley created a bunch of games. We could have multiple instances just like this. And here would be all of my user information. And here would be all my game information. And the connector is the ID of my user that matches the user ID of my game. So those two are together. Does that make sense? Just from the query side?
Yes. Is it possible for you to show us like the MySQL, your database along with this? Because that's kind of how it's like from the one to many, right? So this would have been like the one to many of the games,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so if I grab this value here and I go to, so we've got this, right? And I said this. Instead of ID, I'm going to put 2 because we're here. We know ID is going to equate to 2. This grabs ID is 2, grabs Marley Calhoun, grabs all my information. Then it grabs the game that has the user ID of 2. And so what it returns is this row. Now let's go create another one real quick and then we'll run it again.
Okay, but I kind of see well, I was gonna say I kind of see what you drew here
Yeah.
and how we're looking at it on the database.
Yeah. Let's say, let's say Fortnite. Okay, so I've got these 2, and if I come here, I now get, because it's joining, but I'm still getting multiple instances because there's multiple values that equate to Marley. And so it's matching this value with this value here. Right? So anytime there's an ID of 2 and the game that has a user ID of 2, it's going to put them together.
I see it. I get it. Okay.
Jeffrey, Kevin, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Yes, it does.
Cool. Now, in the very same vein of what we did up here, results is going to get me, we're selecting all, it's going to get me that first value, right? Now, we are going to have a bunch of information. We're going to have a bunch of different rows, right? And I want to keep track of all of the games that are associated. Now, this is me creating a class instance of my user. What I also need to do is I need to create class instances of my games, right? And so what I need to do is I need to iterate through and say now for row in results, I'm going to take my game data and I'm going to, first off, I'll just print results. So I think that'll help you see. I'm going to, okay. Uh-oh. Oh. Okay, so I'm just gonna user real fast. Nope, not user. I'm gonna say slash, I'm gonna go to the dashboard real fast. That's gonna pull this, which is user slash dashboard. So you guys can see, because I think that's gonna make more sense. Okay, I'm gonna get an error, but that's okay. I don't care about the error. This is what I wanted you to see. This is my results. This is a list of values. where it says ID equals 2, Marley, blah, 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 blah. That's the same thing we're seeing here. But what I want you to know is that right here, when I've got a created at and an updated at, because I'm coming from my user side, I'm selecting all from users. This just is created at and updated at. But if you note, my game also has a created at and an updated at, right? Well, because I'm coming from my user side, this games created at, or sorry, when I'm coming from my user side, because these are both the same name, and I need a way to differentiate. And so what this does is, because I'm coming from my user side, the normal updated at and created at is associated to my user, so you don't have to kind of identify. But anything that overlaps, so ID, created at, updated at, if you had other values, for the game side is games.created at, games.updated at, games.id. Now notice my user doesn't have a title, so I don't need the differentiator of games.title. It's already unique enough. So it's just title and rating and platform, right? My user doesn't have those. Development studio. My user has a created at, so it says, okay, I need to differentiate with games.created at. I need to differentiate with games.updated at. And then it's got this user ID 2. Now here's the second value, right? And so what this is doing is I'm first creating a class instance where I pass in that information. It's going to know, okay, data, first name, last name, email, password, created at, updated at. I've got that. First name, last name, ID, whatever. Then what it's doing is it's going through and it's saying, okay, I want to identify the list of games that are associated to my user. And it's going to iterate through all of these. Now, the reason this broke is because ChatGPT gave me the wrong stuff, right? We've got a title. That's awesome. We need a rating. I need a platform. And I need a development studio. Yeah. Because what it was trying to do is, again, because we're trying to, it's iterating through each value here. So the first one is this, right? So that the first instance, when it says row in results, it's talking about this value here. And it's identifying the game data. Because we're coming from our user side and our user has an ID, we have to say games.id equals ID, right? We're identifying what's going on or what the different attributes are in the same way we do up here. And then we have to go through and say, okay, well, it's got a title. My user doesn't have a title, so I don't have to put games.title. I don't have to put games.rating because my user doesn't have a rating. You don't have to put games.platform. I don't have to put games.development studio. My user doesn't have that. I do need to differentiate and say games.created at, games.updated at. And then lastly, that's all I've got here. Cool. Now the last thing we're doing is we're saying, okay, we have this game data. I'm saying, okay, in my user dot games, which I have right here, I want to append. Remember, it's just adding to. So each time it's iterating through, it's going to append the video game instance. So it's going to go into here and it's going to run this init with this data or the data that I pass it here. And so this games is going to be a list of video game objects. So if I did have any sort of static methods or any sort of different functionality, I could, kind of associate that here. could deal with it. And so it's going through and it's creating a video game instance of all of my games, and then it's returning user. And this user has a attribute of games. And so what's nice about that is if I go back, we get hello Marley. Okay, everything's good to go. We can see that I ran this query. This is what I got access to. And so now in my user HTML, I can maybe, let's say, I'm gonna real quickly grab this. Okay. Container. Maybe I want to say H1. Again, I still have this user, so I can say user dot first underscore name. Then maybe I can have another div. I can have a create game. That's fine. It goes to that. And maybe I've got another div. And I want to map through or have a table of all of my video games. So this is kind of where the magic happens. This is us creating a table that for all of my games. So maybe I have an H4. No, I want it in here. That's just or H2 that just says games. I'm going to say your games. Perfect. That's just got our table head's got one row and it's got all these headers, title, rating, platform, development studio. Cool. Now, just like you were saying, Estrella, we've got a list. Each user has a list of games. It might just even be one. That's okay. Or none, right? Maybe it's empty. That's okay. And what we can do with that is I can iterate. I can say for game in games. I don't think this is going to work actually. I think it's got to be user.games, but we'll see. We'll test it. Then I just say game.title, game.rating, game.platform, game.development studio. See if this works. I don't think this is going to work. Yeah, it didn't show anything, right? Because I don't have any games, but let's try user.games. Refresh. Cool. Remember, my user has a list called user.games. My user is this. That's what we're returning. It's got this list of games that I appended to. So what I'm saying is I want to iterate through user.games is that list of game objects. And I want to show the title, the rating, the platform, and development studio. And I end my for loop. Cool. So it says, welcome Marley, create game. And here's your games. If I create a new game, let's say, do you guys have a video game you want to create?
Well, I guess we can do can we go to basic like Super Mario or
Yeah. Super Mario. It's got to be E for everyone. Nintendo. I don't know who created Nintendo or the development studio. Is it just Nintendo?
Ooh, I don't know.
Well, I'll just say Nintendo. That's okay. So if I create this game, that takes me here. But if I say user slash, and we could fix that routing functionality. It now shows up. Now, the big
Nice.
important thing is if I come here and I say create user, and then I say check. I say create user, we get an error because it's saying that there is no results. Let's see, user get with games. Hmm. It's because I am saying get with games and I'm doing a join. Where all of, or sorry, not that join. I'm doing a join and I'm getting all of the games that match. Um, that match our values, right? Or I'm getting all of the games that match, that join together, but I haven't created any games yet. So because I haven't created any games, this is giving me this is giving me nothing, right? It's giving me a tuple. There's no value. Results gives me nothing. So that's what it's saying here. So there's things we could do. We could say,
But it did create it because it has a 3 there.
Yep, it did create it. It's just saying that we said, hey, I want you to get all the values or I want you to join together a table with the user table with ID of 3 with all the games that have the ID of 3, but we don't have any games, so it gave me nothing back, right? Because it's saying there's nothing to give back. There's no joining that could be happening. And so what we
Got
could do, is say something like, if results equals none, return none. And then this kind of prevents that from happening. Right? Because it was just checking, we're getting nothing. But this kind of prevents that from happening. So let's see if I return. Then what? Let's try it. Let's say len of results. Okay. So it just said basically, hey, if there's no game, then return none. Or if there's nothing, right? If this didn't work, return none. But now if I create a game, we go back to that. I don't know how to get back to that. Where's my, okay. I create a game. And then I say, I don't even know what I'm playing right now. Let's put E, that's not true. I create game. Cool, I get Assassin's Creed. But if I say slash user slash dashboard, so now that there's a game, it works and it says, welcome, Kate. You have Assassin's Creed. We'll look next week on how we can kind of make that a little bit better. Because that's not inherently what we want to do. Right? Because we'll want to What we could do really is just, instead of doing all the logic in here, we run it and get all the values here. And then we pass it in that way. That's probably what I would do. And then we could do an if check and say, hey, if there's no values, then I want you to run just to get user. If there is values, then I want you to run the, you know, then I want you to run the get with games. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that would have been a little bit clearer,
Yeah, so we could have said something like,
perhaps.
yeah, so we could say like user with games equals that. And then I could have said like if um yeah, I'll have to think through this. I don't want to waste your time. I know that we're at the time. I'll think through a different way. I don't want to just think on the spot, but I'll think through a different way of how we could have handled that. Just to
Okay.
say, hey, if that's not the case, then what do we do? And maybe it's something as simple as just the flow of our code works differently, where we create a user, it goes, and then we click a button that says view all games or something of that nature, you know? I'll think through that. But really what I want you guys to see is pretending that or showing, okay, we can do a join. We know how to do that. We can iterate through this. And then we
Yeah.
can show that information on our platform. Like I said, this is the heaviest week. Next week, we are just dealing with validations. And then if there's any sort of things I can answer this following Thursday, next week, I will do that, you know, kind of make any sort of clarity. Then we have login and registration. Again, super simple to kind of implement. Just gonna fix in some stuff there. And then we have the belt prep. So this was a heavy week and I fully recognize. I'm sorry about that.
Understood. Understood.
Yeah. Are there any questions, friends?
No, I don't have a question, but I did try to do the exclamation mark on VS Studio, and it
Mhm.
didn't work for me. So I don't know. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Do
You
you?
can look up emit abbreviations. I don't think I have anything added, but
Because I Googled it too to see like
yeah.
maybe I have some I don't know, type it wrong, but it's okay.
Is it an
And
HTML file?
yeah,
Yeah, that's
I
weird
just
because it should be by default. It should automatically come.
yeah, that's what I read. So I like pressed enter. There was like something else they told me to like different ways, but
Mm-hmm.
just didn't work. So maybe I just
Yeah,
figure out.
maybe next office hour we can kind of dive in into the preferences and stuff and see if we can figure that out.
Okay, cool. Thank
Cool.
you.
You're
Appreciate it.
welcome. Yeah,
Thank you.
friends.
Have
Yep.
a good
Okay, I'll stop the
night.
recording. I hope you guys